I would love to invite to the stage Terry Jervis. Terry, I won't begin to say the accolades and the experience this man has, because I want him to break it to you. He is replacing Bianca. Bianca couldn't make it today. We will get him next time. But Terry's good friends with Bianca. Terry also has a space project he can share. Big hand for Terry Jervis.
Hi, everyone. I know you're looking for
You don't know Bianca.
the lovely Bianca. I'm here because of Bianca, actually. I met Bianca not that long ago at Spacecom. And I particularly wore, this, which is my Rolls-Royce Starship Hope shirt for her.
Excellent.
My spacecraft project is with Rolls-Royce.
Yeah. Let's start with that. Now we've talked about it. We're going to reverse back. Tell us what you're doing right now with Rolls-Royce.
First of all, I know you weren't expecting me, and I know a lot of you were here to hear about space. But you're already in space. You know that. You're on a spaceship, which is a very large mothership. Let's call it a mothership Earth, that's traveling through the universe at 65,000 miles per hour. So we are in space.
That's pretty fast.
And we're gonna talk a little bit about that. So everything I'm going to talk about today is from personal experience. It's my view of my journey and my view of my interactions with the world and its people. And also, I'm not here on this stage for me. I just stepped into the breach for a friend and a new friend, and Vicky, to you as well. They treated me so nicely at the last event. And for me, it was easy because, I work in an industry which is time sensitive, time critical, but also you've got billions of people watching what you do.
Do you want to tell everyone what you do? What do you do?
I'm a former BBC executive. I'm a producer and director, formerly by trade. Then I was an executive producer, so I ran 2 departments here in the UK and in Hollywood and in New York. Then I did big global broadcasts. I came out of news and current affairs and went into live television program and broadcast. So things like the Millennium Event, Queen's Jubilee, World Cup, Olympics, Games.
All the big ones.
All the big concerts from, Michael Jackson to Elton John, Queen, rap, LL Cool J, Public Enemy, Pavarotti, Sting.
And it goes on.
That goes on. I worked out of the Top Gear department, so I launched Jeremy Clarkson into his solo career from him being with me on Top Gear. Smash Hits and Top of the Pops, and then World Environment Day. And then when I went to Hollywood, I became a Motown executive.
You were working with Quincy Jones at one point.
So Quincy and I go back to the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. I ran...
And that's all our favourites, right?
Yeah. I ran 2 hours of output on the BBC. So I was the BBC's most senior... I was the youngest executive in the BBC's history. At 27, I started running a multi-million-pound department. I had a very, very good mentor by the name of Colin Adams, and he was the one that believed in me. He came from a working class background as well, but from up north where it was shipbuilding and steel. I'm from the East End of London, and so we were the 2 non-Oxbridge people in the BBC at the time. And I think there was, I was talking to a gentleman there, and I said, look, I've traveled the world, and one thing I can tell you, it's more about culture than anything else and how you can identify with people.
Or take your clothes off with tribal people.
Well, that's because you're finding commonality.
Yeah, I did.
And you're doing something which they can reference.
Yeah. Culture. Immediately, I saw that. And that was their uniform. I'd say uniform because it's what they wore to go out and do this work. Mm-hmm. And I recognize that at such a young age. That's what you have to do.
And the reason I can talk a lot about space is because the first woman in space, I remember.
You kind of remember it fondly.
Yeah.
Is there something there?
Not that I met her, but she was Russian, and but
that's okay.
My dad met Yuri Gagarin, who was the first man in space. So I had this thing, and my dad used to work on radar for the Royal Navy after World War II. I've always been fascinated by space. And when you're in live television, so when I transitioned from documentary features, news and current affairs, business, all of that, to live global broadcasts, you start working with space and satellites. Because that's how
it connects.
It all gets there. And then when I bring it in the year 2000, do you remember everything was supposed to crash out of the sky? It was Y2K.
Oh, yeah, Y2K. Okay.
Phones wouldn't work, banking systems, and there was a big threat. And so at the BBC, we had to go on this kind of training exercise that if everything should crash, we'd have to go back to analog.
Whoa.
Or
Morse code.
And yeah, literally, just, all the dishes you don't use now. Remember when you used to have a aerial on top of
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I remember those.
Yeah, so we'd have to go back to that. So I had to go through all that. But I also then ended up starting to work with NASA because we were doing a live broadcast from the space station, and the modules were still just being kind of put up. So, we had to beam up there and then get that back down. And then the military came calling for me.
How does the military come calling for you? How does that happen?
It's an interesting world out there, all I can say. And they came to me. And then I became the Royal Air Force's first ever commercial business and communications agent. And I still work with them to this day.
What does that mean?
It means you...
Sounds impressive, though.
Yeah, but you do a lot of things that gets you to understand the military, both, from the Army, the Navy, to how you all get your clothes and goods, because there's someone somewhere patrolling while you sleep. Nice. There's someone somewhere protecting the goods that arrive here. There's someone somewhere making sure that we're monitoring space so your banking system doesn't crash, or an asteroid doesn't hit it, or somebody doesn't fire an object to deliberately do those things.
Yeah.
And I think it's also what made me gravitate to the military was because my time in the BBC in 1922 was set up by people who'd been at war in 1914, and so it was like a military organization. And even when I look at the way I was sent around the world, and everywhere you landed, there was an office, so it's a bit like that. And you had a ranking system before you even made it up to producer, director, or even an executive. You get postings or attachments around the world to see how you coped in war zones or famine zones or wherever it was. Since working with the Air Force, I then started to meet a lot of other interesting companies outside of my sphere of normal interest. So from space to defense, I knew about automotive, but then I started to work with, Bentley for one, and various others. I helped launch a channel called Trace TV in France. Then I brokered the deal with Sky because I helped Sky launch their daytime programming. Premier League channel, Formula One channel, and Trace Sport was all part of my my brief to supply content, but also I managed the Trace Sport output here because, I brokered the deal with Sky. So Sky was basically paying me and paying us for the license to help bring the behind the scenes of the sports stars. So behind the scenes of Formula One, behind the scenes of Premier League.
Amazing.
So not the live kind of football or the live F1. I then got to meet, I was in the States, and at this time, after Motown, I was then working with a guy called Clarence Avon, who, if you haven't seen him, go on Netflix and look up the Black Godfather documentary. I think you find it very, very interesting.
I'll look that one up.
About the range of businesses he was involved in. But, I did things like working on Batman and Star Trek and Marvel.
You can't just say that flippantly.
Sorry?
You can't just say that, I worked on Batman. That's absolutely amazing.
I want the audience to get more out of this for their businesses and careers. So, whilst I've worked with all these big companies, the bottom line is you still have to deal with humans and people and personalities, right? And sometimes it can be very complex. Anybody in here who's a CEO or COO of a very large company will understand that this. I worked with all these people. I've had a great life. It's been a charmed one, and it's been an exciting one. It's been a dangerous one. It's been a fulfilling one. But always, always at the heart of it, I was able to come back home to inner peace.
That's amazing. Not everyone has that. Not everyone can achieve that.
Today, when somebody says, "Oh, I've got X million views," I remember I was in the headquarters of Facebook, and in the headquarters of Facebook in
I know how he just says that. Carry on.
No. But I said this to who was then the business communications officer for Facebook. And Mark Zuckerberg and Sheryl Sandberg were there, and it's quite interesting what's happening now. And I remember in Facebook headquarters, there's 2 giant screens with the Earth rotating on the dark side and the light side, right? So just like the Earth rotation. And I said, "What are these little dots lighting up?" They said, "Oh, these are all the people we have. And, we know what computer or mobile phone they're using, because they have to configure the screen to your, whether it's an Apple phone or an Android phone or a PC or Apple a laptop or whatever." And I said, "So what are those people doing?" "Oh, they're gathering data, da-da-da-da-da." And they started reeling off all this stuff that they do. And they wanted to give me a blue tick, which they did at the time. How anybody knows anything about Facebook and Instagram. And I said, "Well, blue tick doesn't mean anything to me." He said, "But the blue tick means you get all these other benefits." And they said, "We've worked out that you've had 4.5 billion people see something you've done. And we want to hit that." And I think at that time they were only about 1.5 billion, right? And I stopped and I said to her, "Do you realize you have more information day to day, real time, than governments do?" And she said, "No, we never thought about it like that." I said, "Well, you need to think about that, and you need to think about the responsibility required."
I'm glad someone told them
to handle all of that data. So I'm not going to use Facebook the way most people do. If I've got something to say and I need to put it on the platform or Instagram, I'll do that. That's why if you look at my Instagram and Facebook, you'll see low numbers. Because I come from a world that I could land in any country and have a friend.
Nice.
Right? And that's not a joke. That's true. Because of the amount of kids that I've given pencils and paper to, because I know how much that means. Where I put water in a village or standpipes or electricity as a trade-off for me filming there, because I don't want to go and just take. I want to be able to build infrastructure and make them understand the value of intellectual property. Just people's lives that you've touched through covering a story that gives the exposure that makes people see that they can be heard. So for me, this isn't a celebrity business. I work with celebrities just like you may work with people from your day-to-day life. They're just different people. So I can talk about that if you want to talk about behind the scenes stuff, but I'd rather, we talk about those things and the lessons learned and how you can apply them to your day-to-day business.
So let's focus on that bit, because I'd like us to understand what it's like working with a big brand. And then you say that they're just humans, but in reality, yes, they are human, but how do we connect with them? What's that secret sauce that you have that we don't have?
All right. So we're in a very transactional world, right? And it kind of gets us living in fear. We watch share prices do this, and then suddenly a politician, nameless politician somewhere in the world, does something. And
I don't know who you're talking about.
And the thing starts to...
Never heard of him yet.
Right? And I always say to economists, when you say, "Oh, but public sentiment has caused this to crash," or, the guy said this and suddenly the share prices have dipped. And I remember Rolls-Royce's share prices were really, really tanking at one point. And I said, that's why I brought Starship hope to it. And I said to him, quite simply, when everybody would say to me, why call your starship hope? I said, because that's what everybody lives for.
Mm.
You have to hope for something. And when you look up into the sky, you feel hopeful. When you feel the sun, you feel good. When you see the moon, you feel like there's something to marvel at. Right? So for me, what we have to remember, ultimately in business, no matter how transactional or AI business may become, people buy people.
Mm.
People warm to people. People put their trust in people. And things, mechanical or electronic or digital, break down sometimes, just as people do. Right? And we tend to think, because we've become such a transactional world, that you can just fix the digital or the mechanical, but we don't think about how we fix the people.
People, yeah.
Right?
We kind of just replace them.
Right. So, look, my career has not just been built by me, it's been built by the people I serve and the people I am responsible for. And I wish every CEO would think in
that's
some
very
way
powerful, actually.
like this, because, you know, I had to develop a set of values that said, who am I? What do I stand for? And what will I not stand for?
That's interesting to say what you won't stand for.
Yeah.
I'm always about, like, what do I stand for? What do I stand for? I've never actually thought what I won't stand for.
You've probably never been put in those situations where it's life or death and you have to think to yourself, what I won't stand for. Right? Or you see something happening and you say, you know, do I turn away, turn a blind eye?
Yeah.
Or do I stand up for what I believe in and what is right?
That takes a lot of courage.
Yeah, but I've been in a guerrilla warfare since I was 5. So, you know, I don't necessarily have the fear that I suppose most people would do, because I think, you know, we're talking about culture, we're talking about experiences, we're talking about things that shape us, and everybody in this room has got something that shaped you going back in your past. But what most people don't do, unfortunately, is say, what did I learn and how do I apply myself after my misfortune or after I've fallen down or after something very traumatic has happened in your life?
So when
how
you
build resilience.
When you mentioned that, Terry, I don't know if it's the right place to speak about this in front of everyone, but I'm going to anyway, is if you would be so kind as to share. There's moments in your life that haven't been so rosy. There has been a massive transformation in your life that, if you could share with people, what happened at certain
but look,
that got you to this point.
But first of all, let me preface that by saying, just missed the bomb blast that blew up my office when I was doing the Big Breakfast, if you all remember that TV show. Then I was driving past the NatWest Tower, and I had to remind some of their own staff that a bomb blew up here and blew out the windows of my Jaguar while I was in it. You know, I grew up in an area of the Teddy Boys, the Skinheads, the National Front, and I had to fight with all of them. I mean, literally fight.
Proper fight.
So when people talk about knife crime and gun crime, I used to have people taking pop shots at us as I walked through the estate.
Oh.
Just because, you know, we're a Caribbean family. I used to have Teddy Boys come out of a pub, which is playing rock and roll and blues. You know, Little Richard, Chuck Berry, Dinah Washington, you know, Laverne Baker, with flails and knives, and tear up my school jacket. To the point where I had to go to school. In those days, we could do actual technical things and make things, and we made a Rowan breastplate. And I remember going home and my mum's probably slashing my jacket, like, what did that? I said, oh, Mum, the Teddy Boys came out and, you know, they had the knives on the chain and slashed the back of my jacket. What? You know how much that jacket costs?
Normal day.
Normal day. And so she spent the time stitching it up because we couldn't afford another jacket. And, you know, all your mum would say to you is, when them boys hit you, make sure you hit them back.
Oh.
Because you couldn't call the police. The police wasn't going to do anything for you. Know what that's like.
Yeah.
And so you learn to fight young. Then I went into martial arts. I became a tournament fighter.
As you do.
Yeah, but mostly, it was to protect the community and protect my mom and my sisters.
Do you think some of what you learned at childhood, some of that DNA is kind of transferred over to where you are today?
No doubt, but I don't think that was it. Because I think the most turning point for me was there was a singer called Sam Cooke. He sang "You Send Me Twisting the Night Away," Cupid, Chain Gang, and most famously, you all might know him because when Barack Obama was being elected, he used the song "Change Is Gonna Come" on his inaugural campaign. I made the first documentary about the life of Sam Cooke. I started it at 14 and I finished it when I was 16. And I put it on a local cinema. And what was to become Channel 4 and the BBC turned up to watch it. But also what I didn't know was Mick Jagger, Paul McCartney, Rod Stewart, all these guys were big fans of Sam Cooke. They recorded his songs. I got to meet them later once I joined the BBC. And I was too young when the BBC tried to find out who this guy was that made this film. They thought it was a big man. And I used to buy and sell comic books because I used to go to America. In those days, there was a plane called, airline called Laker Airways. And you could rush to Heathrow, pay your 50 quid and just jump on the plane. You couldn't buy a ticket in advance. You had to literally go. But they had a chaperone. And my mum would let me go because she'd give me things to take for her brother in New York. Okay. As you did in those days, because the families were spread around the world post-war. That's another story. But anyway, so I used to go over, give them all my clothes. I found out who Sam Cooke's manager was, a guy called Alan Klein, who also managed the Beatles and the Stones in America. And I realized that after buying and selling comic books in the UK, we couldn't get American comic books. That's how I got into Marvel and DC. And
how old were you at this time?
I was about 14. And so I'd give all my cousins my clothes. I'd put all the comics, pack them up in these suitcases and bring them back because I knew that you didn't have to pay tax on comics because I found out that they could be classed as books.
Yeah.
Right? So I'd bring all the Marvel comics and they were classified as imports because we couldn't get them. So I could sell them at a premium. So something that cost me like literally 10, 20 pence, I could sell at £5.
Do you have them today?
It still happens today.
No, do you have them today? Do you have any comics there?
Oh, I do have lots of comics. I used to have one of the biggest next to Jonathan Ross and Paul Gambaccini.
Yeah.
But there was a fire, after my cancer that
Wait. You had cancer?
Yeah, I told you that. I had stage 4 terminal cancer. I was given 1% chance to live, and I lost 5 years of my life.
What happened then?
Well, I had a near-death experience.
What age were you here at this point?
Oh, no, this was like, now 10 years ago. But five years of that was literally blind, paralyzed, on a feeding tube.
In hospital?
Yeah. And then at home, I had burns. You get severe burns from the chemo and the radiation. When you get 33 days of radiation, that's more than any astronaut. So when you get that intense radiation, your skin burns. So you're like a burn victim after an air crash or a car crash or something like that, or, house fire. So not only was I, totally incapacitated, I was recovering from the near-death experience because the hospital thought they lost me, which they did for a little while. And then I was a burn victim, and then I also had radical surgery because I had head, neck, and throat cancer. And then the tumors started to spread throughout my body. No way they felt that you could live. And I remember going into the surgery. Funny, we're thinking about it now, because sometimes these things you put to the back of your mind. But, I live with it every day because, from radical surgery and now I'm out of radiation and treatment. And I'm nothing like I was then, although I just don't feel it necessarily because I have bolts through my body.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Reconstructing.
You probably can't see the scars, but I remember when I was being taken into surgery, and the doctors have this intranet thing where they look at the most what they think is the exciting cases, and they said, well, could you sign this and it will help people with cancer for the future because, we don't know if we're going to lose you at this point. And so we don't have much hope. The prognosis, as I said, was less than 1%, but they wanted to try out this new radical kind of surgery to remove muscle tissue, nerves, and things that the tumors had wrapped themselves around, and there's no way they could untangle it without removing it from the body. So as they're going to anesthetize me and I'm going in, I remember the guy the surgeon from Singapore liked Star Wars. The surgeon from England liked Star Trek.
Surgery. We expect the medical staff to do their job, obviously, and just give to us. But if you give to them, even if it's a smile,
I said, I want you to be Dr. McCoy, and I said, I want you to be Yoda, because I need the Force. And I need somebody who's kind of,
that's crazy.
Of petulant and says, I'm going to get through this,
If people have gone to surgery, we expect the medical staff to do their job, obviously, and just give to us. But if you give to them, even if it's a smile or make them feel something.
The thing is, they're not supposed to, they said, we can't take this, we're not supposed to take gifts and da-da-da-da. A bit like that in the military and when I was in the BBC. And I said, look, this is education to people. You have to think, what am I imbuing? What am I putting into this that I seriously believe in? And if somebody came back to me to complain about the thing I made, I would be able to defend it and say, this is why I did it. And this is why I believe it was the right thing to do. And it was only intended to do some good for people. All right? So even arms dealers will tell you, I'm doing this to preserve the peace.
Yeah.
Or do you say, I have to stand up to that threat to protect my mother and sister?
Yeah.
Right? And that's like in business.
Protecting your idea or protecting your business? Same feeling?
I always look at it as protecting your people. Not protecting my business. You see, you went automatically to business.
Thinking protecting my profit.
Right, but that's where business today, the Western way of thinking, is failing. The Western way of thinking is failing because it's not thinking about its people. It's thinking about its businesses. It's thinking about the business. For who? Who inherits the business? The shareholders? If that business collapses, who suffers? The shareholders. Who works in those places? The people. If that business collapses, the people suffer.
Yeah.
So without them, what's the business?
And that seems to be the last thing on everyone's mind.
Right. So any business executive out there working at this level, I hope you understand that. When you go home tonight, think about your people. Think about who's worth protecting, because in my head, that's the CEO's job.
That's different.
What vision?
What vision?
What vision are they driving through?
What the shareholders want.
What the shareholders want. Look, perpetual profit is impossible. That's why markets go up and down. We are in a fragile state right now for a number of reasons. Fresh water on Earth, That's what space may offer us. Diminishing resources, that's what space may offer us. And all of this stuff about going to space and exploration, space is very harsh. I mean, if Bianca was here, she'd tell you.
Yeah.
But for me, going up to the edge of space and flying with the Royal Air Force and doing all that stuff and being able to see the world.
Wait. You've been to space?
No, I haven't been to space. I've been to the edge of space.
So that's the stratosphere.
Yeah.
Beyond,
but
not beyond that.
No. You know.
You have to...
When you go up in an exercise, a mission exercise, you actually see the curvature of the Earth, and you know, don't forget, Concorde was essentially a spaceship. You know, Concorde,
I can look at it that way. I've never looked at it that way.
Flew to the edge of space, and so it's not that gave me a different perspective, and it's not that, you know, surviving cancer and trauma even before that, you know, I told you with everything else. You have to say, what is my purpose? Why have these things happened? And what have I learned from them? How has it made me? And I realized that actually the resilience was built before all of that.
Mm.
And so why I talk about business in that way, because everybody in here is essentially in here to learn, right? They've come to edify themselves. They've come to see somebody talk about something hopefully meaningful, not about themselves. I've done what I've done. You can look me up in the National Portrait Gallery, the British Film Institute, or just Google my name. I've got nothing to prove. But what I have done is made sure these things are recorded for all time. And it's a resource to you to understand how you can make your lives better or business better. And I always say, I never chased profit, right? In the sense that I told you can't have perpetual profit. It's impossible. But what I did was I set the goals and I gave people purpose. And once we had enough purpose to achieve our goals, that's where the profit came. No matter what happened in the market, we still profited because we could weather the conditions. We could see in advance what was going to happen, because with purpose comes perception. You know, without vision, people perish. And that's what happens when you're chasing profit, perennial profit. You lose a sense of vision. You lose all purpose and values. You will do things that go against the grain because you're trying to get the quick hit.
And with that purpose that you found, I just want to go back to where this purpose feels like it's an energy that's been transformed from another energy, which was pain.
Yeah.
So that pain turned into purpose, turned into a perception.
You say pain, but I've had a life of joy. I look at pain. Look, pain is our friend, right?
No one agrees?
No. Listen, there is no one in this room that doesn't know what pain is. If you've never known what pain is, put your hand up.
Or I can't see anyone. No. Everyone's hands down.
Everyone hands down. Because from a child, if we touch the heated pan, what happens?
Burn.
Right, so we know not to do it again.
Yeah.
Right? When we're out playing and doing our adventurous stuff and we fall down and scratch our knees, what happens?
You cry and ask for mommy.
Yeah. So we need comfort. We need somebody to go to. We need somebody that loves us, that wants to take care of us, right? And that's all part of the human condition too.
Yeah.
And, you know, I find in a successful business, even having compassion is pretty rare.
It's rare.
Right? So one of the things when I was running, you know, my departments could go from my core staff, which was about 30 people, to if I was doing a big global broadcast to 2,000 and something people. All of them I was responsible for. You know, it was dangerous stuff. You know, anything could happen, even down to the carpentry. You know, the massive set falls on your head. You've got to be across all of that. And then, you know, I got into the merchandising business and I started manufacturing toys and video games and cuddly toys. And you still got to think the safety of when you put these things in people's hands.
It's amazing that you think of that. You think of that in everything you do.
I think of that in everything, because you talked about energy. Do you know that when we think, and I learned a lot about this from the neurologist, because when you have a near-death experience or you pass away, you know, oxygen stops going to your brain.
Yeah.
So they got to test that, you know, there's been no brain dysfunction and stuff like that. And like parts of my brain was still kind of lighting up and carrying on. But this is energy. And in my near-death experience, you know, when they say a lot of people, well, not a lot because there aren't that many, right? We're pretty rare. But they talk about you enter this light.
Yeah.
Now,
did you see the light?
Well, I'm not coming from a religious perspective. I'm not coming from a mystical, you know, I know a lot of people can use this to manipulate people, right? I've seen people kind of do that. No, mine, I'd like to put down to probably a more practical science level. Is that one thing I know is energy doesn't die. So whatever your aura, remember, whatever you think, you've just emitted energy to parts of the brain that does that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's energy. Where does it go? Because energy doesn't die. So it continues through your body to move an action. But also, have you never had that thing where you're thinking about somebody, but you haven't called them, and then suddenly they call you, or you bump into them?
That's exactly what happened when you texted me today. And I'm like, Bianca's just dropped. Terry can come in.
Right. So who knows how the universe works? We still don't know what dark matter is, yet it makes up 90, don't quote me, but it's like over 90% of the universe. So we still don't even know how 90% of the universe works. And we, as physical things, are only 3% of it.
Mm.
Right? So it's like we understand at a physical level how the body functions, but at a metaphysical level of what we create in our minds, we really have very little understanding of that. And I remember, one thing when I was kind of re-entering my body, because I could see the room and I could see my mother trying to bring me to life, and my wife at the time was there in the corner crying, and my mum is...
And you could see this from a...
Yeah. And calling out for the doctors and all of this stuff and it running in, blah, blah, blah. But to be honest with you, I didn't want to come back. I was in a really nice place. It was like really warm and inviting and felt like good. And
What made you come back?
I didn't. It pushed me back. And I came back with this mantra.
What was that?
You are at peace with the world. No, sorry. You are at peace in yourself, and you've brought so much to the world. You must go back. And when I came back, the Air Force never left me. They said, look, Terry, come back. Do some stuff for us. Get back on your feet. And
amazing.
The chief of the air staff, he was currently now the chief, he was the assistant chief of the air staff, but he's now the chief of the air staff. It was coming up to the Royal Air Force's 100th anniversary, and I was tasked to look at innovation. What would the Royal Air Force be doing in the next 100 years, right? So the 100th anniversary was in 2018, and I was asked to look at the future and beyond. And I said, you won't be operating in the air. You'll be operating in space. And people were laughing and said no. And anyway, so that's how I created the spaceship, the Starship. I went to Rolls-Royce because you know the Harrier jump jet, the one that takes off vertically and flies, Concorde. Yeah. Rolls-Royce built all those engines, the Merlin.
Yeah.
And we can go into that later. But also the F-35 stealth fighter was just coming in. So I went to Rolls-Royce and I called them up one day and I said, this is who I am. And they were like, yeah. And I said, no. Your SVP, I looked him up. I said, I want to meet him. I've got something that will put Rolls-Royce into the future.
Wow, that's a big call.
Yeah, and he agreed to see me and we got there. And do you know what? It's funny. When we sat down, I mean, he was a bit fatigued, right? Because he was like, all these companies and the Air Force and all these people do is come and ask us for money, to sponsor something.
Yeah.
So whilst the military does procure things from these industries, sometimes they're doing things that require sponsorship. Sorry, I have to keep drinking water because one of the things about the level of radiation and things I've had is I don't produce saliva anymore. You're gifted. You guys can sit.
Some things we take for granted, right? We won't. We'll slow down at the moment.
No. It's all right. As long as I got water, it's all right. So I said to them, "You have the most amazing propulsion systems to get to the other planets in the kind of time and limited resources we'll have in space. This is what I think." And I designed this starship with the RR in the middle.
Oh.
It says created by Terry Jervis, powered by Rolls-Royce. And they looked at me and they said, that's our IP. I said, yeah, doesn't it look good? And he said,
that's very bold of you.
Yeah, it does. It does really look kind of cool. And he said, but we're not involved in space. And I said, well, you should be. And I started talking about Apollo 8. Now, Apollo 8 was a famous one before landing on the moon, which was Apollo 11, where we looked back at ourselves for the first time from another planet or moon. And there's that very famous photograph called Earth Rising.
Earth Rising, yeah.
So I'm chatting away and I said, my friend Quincy Jones did the music and they were playing the music on the spacecraft on it. And he said, stop. You know Quincy Jones? And I said,
that was my reaction to it.
Yeah. And he said, Quincy's my all-time favorite. And I looked at the time and I said, oh, I'm just about entering 8 o'clock zone for Los Angeles. So I said, all right, I'll get Quincy on the phone. So I did.
Putting in a favor there.
Yeah. And I got him on the phone and
that's how you win Rolls-Royce.
No, but it wasn't that. I got through the door. The main thing is to get through the door to get the meeting. When you're in the meeting is then you work out what's going to be in the best interest of that person, not what you've got to sell. It's whatever it is that you have that they don't know they need, right? Or there's a problem that you can fix, or there's something that can help them grow, right? So your purpose, your mission is to do your research before you go so that you can get what you want. But then when you get in, you also got to remember you cannot fail them. How are you going to deliver? And so on my delivery, I said, I don't build spaceships. I'm not involved in space in that way. I'm involved with the military and I've used satellites and I know all that stuff. I said, but actually, this will be good for Rolls-Royce's share prices. Because they've got to have something new and fresh to say, this is what we're going to grow in our business, right? And
to the heart.
But the fun part of it was, I said to him, record a song just like Quincy did for Apollo 8, and why don't you come down to the studio?
Amazing.
And he said, oh, yeah. So a lady called Patty Austin, who's Quincy's goddaughter, and I should say daughter really, because she did all the vocal coaching and everything for, whether it was Thriller, Bad, James Ingram, you name it, she's worked with them. There's a great movie called 20 Feet from Stardom about the female backing singers in the music business.
I haven't seen that one.
And how much they made the actual records work. And then some of them became lead vocalists and stuff like that, like her. And she's a Grammy Award winner, right? Yeah. So we used Quincy's band. We put together the track in Los Angeles. The SVP of Rolls-Royce came down to see us doing the mixes and building the track here in London. And he brought an electronic violin. And I thought, I've actually never seen anybody play an electronic violin because I've only worked with big orchestras, right? So it's a good thing. And he started playing something on this violin, and it was kind of Celtic sounding. And I said, that's it. That's what we need on this track. And he said, oh, do you produce music then as well? I said, yeah, don't worry. I've worked with Stevie Wonder, Diana Ross, blah, blah. And he was like, what? You never said that in the meeting. I said, yeah, come. So we made the record, and then we went number one in the R&B charts and sold physical records. Yeah, and this is only like in just before COVID. Huh?
What track was that?
It was called Hope Has Arrived, which is the name of the spacecraft. Hope means Human Outer Planetary Explorer. But I wanted to give people hope. So I built the acronym after I said hope to everybody. But essentially, that's what it was. So after that, we became like good friends, and I got the IP to use the Starship and logo. We're just now creating the virtual of the actual spacecraft so we can use it in the metaverse and teach people about space. That's how I came to Bianca, because she's a space engineer.
She builds spacecraft.
She builds spacecraft. And so when she saw mine, she was like, what? And I said, yeah, but I really need a real space engineer. Yeah. I'm an amateur, really. But I got by because Rolls-Royce took me into this division, which is like Area 51. Do you know what Area 51 is? UFOs, high tech, all that. They got that as well. And I got to work with some of the greatest minds who's worked on so many things that you probably would never know. And I worked with them to build the spacecraft.
Amazing.
Yeah. It's not easy for everyone. And I'm not, as I say, this is personal. This is my personal experience. But I used to read comic books, as I told you. And comic books, believe it or not, gave me values of heroism, of what it was like to do the right thing and do right by people. And look at my career. Even with the challenges I've had, I haven't even spoken about the business challenges. But my values overrode everything. And that's not saying, I wouldn't bend the rules a little bit to get things done, because sometimes the rules were not made for you. You know this as a woman, right? So you have to learn to circumnavigate those things. And just like with the cancer, I had to learn to circumnavigate what everybody was saying would happen to me. And I did that through reading comic books, going back into my childhood, finding the things that made me feel upbeat about myself and that I could take on the world. And sometimes, as much as we think we're adults and we think, oh, that's not what I should do or what it takes to be a man, there's a lot of manosphere stuff in all of today. And I'm like, wow, look at what social media has done. Right? And that's because there aren't enough people like me talking the way I do. So if any of you have something to say, you should step up too. That's how I feel about cancer.
Thank you so much, Terry, for sharing that life story. Ladies and gentlemen, so is it. And I think just echoing what Terry says, for those who are already members, those who are thinking of being members, we'd love for them to be able to step up, for us to have an audience with you up on stage, for you to share maybe that pain that's created those values, that created a purpose, that's created that vision. Some things that we borrow from our childhood or the way we've been brought up lends itself to our purpose, to our business. We borrow from that all the time. We've seen that from Alex. We had a snippet from Sammy, and you've just absolutely echoed that. You're such a phenomena, an interstellar man. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, Terry Jervis.